You want to know what the worst feeling in the world is when you're trying to compose a shot and you feel that hot breath on the back of your neck because you have a client or somebody else on set trying to see what the image looks like. And this is probably going to happen because you're not using a wireless monitoring system to not only maintain some social distance, but you don't want to find out what your clients had for breakfast. So in today's video, we're going to talk about the Hollyland Mars 4K transmitter and receiver. Now this works with other Hollyland products as well, but it also works as a standalone when you want to use your own monitors. It also has a bunch of different features that we're going to get into this video. Now the Mars 4K coming out of the box actually has a pretty minimal offering. That isn't necessarily a bad thing, but what's inside of the box is going to be your transmitter, your receiver, an extra antenna, which is kind of weird because you need 2 antennas for each system, which means you probably need 4 or at least 2 if you had to replace them. But you also have a USB-C adapter and a DC power cable if you want to plug this monitor in order to power it. Speaking of power, you do have 3 different options in terms of powering the Hollyland Mars 4K. You have the choice of using the DC power either to plug in or to detap for VMAP batteries. You're also going to have the ability to use SONY batteries, which you normally find on monitors, and also you're going to have USB-C as a way of powering the Mars 4K. And then in terms of its I/O, you're going to have HDMI, which is pretty commonplace in budget wireless monitoring setups, but this one also is going to have SDI as well. However, I will say when using SDI, it became a little bit more difficult for me to get 4K as an output, so I've just been using the HDMI for the purpose of this video, and generally speaking, you probably are too. Now in terms of startup and actually going through the menu settings, they actually do find each other pretty easily. All I have to do is set up my channels and make sure it's pairing, and the receiver and the transmitter find each other fairly easily. It's also a nice touch that the menu system is easy to follow and it's in color, which is something I didn't really think I needed, but I don't know, I don't mind it. Now with budget wireless monitoring setups, one of the main concerns is going to be its latency. And the Hollyland Mars 4K does have 3 different types of connection modes that you can use depending on your situation. Now there is going to be an HD mode, which is going to give you the highest bit rate in terms of its output. However, it is going to sacrifice some of that latency and it might not be the fastest. However, if you do need a little bit more speed, there's the conveniently named speed mode, which is actually gonna get closer to the 6 millisecond latency that this system actually offers. And then you're gonna have a balance mode that's gonna give you a medium between having the resolution that you're looking for and also having the latency speed. My advice though is that I'm willing to forego a little bit of resolution and bit rate in terms of quality in order to have the speed if I'm focus pulling. However, if this is just a way for me to get a client or a director off my shoulder while I'm shooting, then I can use the HD mode or the balance mode, as it's gonna have less latency, but it's also going to have higher quality on the screen. Now the Mars 4K transmitter also has the ability to transmit to up to 2 other Hollyland devices or 4 iOS devices, which is super easy by using the HollyView app in order to connect to them, which still gives you the wireless capability so you can monitor your image while you're on set. Now the Mars 4K does exactly that, and it outputs a 4K signal from the transmitter into the receiver to your monitor. So as long as the monitor you're showing it up to is 4K enabled, you are going to get a higher resolution, which is something in this category of budget wireless monitoring setups I don't see too often. I do own the Axon CineView as well, and I actually had it before Hollyland sent me this, and it was nice. However, I didn't get a 4K output out of that system, but it is really nice when I can output in 4K to a client or a director or somebody pulling focus for me. Now the Mars 4K does work really well with the Hollyland Mars M1 because the Hollyland Mars M1 is a 2-way player in a receiver and a transmitter as well. So I wanted to try this out in a real life situation. So what I did was use a transmitter from the Mars 4K, and then I set my Hollyland Mars M1 as the receiver, and then I actually started pulling focus by hand in order to see what the latency was like and to see if it's a viable resource in terms of pulling focus wirelessly. Now I did use speed mode to reduce the latency. However, I will say that there is a little bit of lag when you're pulling focus with fast moving objects, which means in terms of pulling focus and the latency that's going to be on here at 6 milliseconds, I think if things are fairly stationary and fairly controlled, you'll be able to get away with it. However, if you are doing things like fitness, like which I do a lot, it's going to be a little bit tougher for you to be able to pull focus when there's a lot of things moving quickly. But in terms of using it as a client monitoring system or director's monitoring system, because you're not going to worry too much about the lag and latency, you're probably going to be more than fine using the Hollyland Mars 4K. Now the Mars 4K does have a distance rating of 450 feet, but when I actually tested this, I got a little bit more distance, which is always nice and welcome. However, when I'm pulling focus wirelessly or I have a client monitoring system, I'm probably not that far away, so this is actually pretty decent in terms of what it can offer. Keep in mind this is a direct line of sight test, so I wouldn't necessarily think it's going to be 400 meters away if you're on separate floors of a building or anything like that. So let's talk about price and who the Hollyland Mars 4K is actually for. Now at the time of this video, it sits at about $699. And to be honest, for the functionality that it has, the fact that it can output in 4K, you have HDMI and SDI options as well, I think the juice is worth the squeeze and it's more than worth the price. because the next step you have to go up to is probably going to be something like a more expensive Hollyland system, or go right up into something like a tear deck system. Now, if you're somebody that needs a wireless monitoring setup in a professional situation and you have to pull focus, or you need a client director's monitor system, and you might be looking at something like a tear deck, but your wallet says no, then the Mars 4K is something that's going to be perfect for you. If you are somebody that's working on an indie film set or a small crew project and you have things that are fairly controlled, there's not a lot of moving parts, but you need something to wirelessly focus from, or you need to do some light follow focusing work, I also think this works in those applications as well, but just making sure that you're using the right mode for the situation. Overall, I think Hollyland is doing big things in terms of making tools and technology for small crews and indie filmmaking situations. That being said, you are going to get what you pay for, and for the functionality that it has, I wouldn't necessarily buy this expecting to get a tear deck bolt system for a fraction of the price. And in terms of budget wireless monitoring systems, there is actually pretty heated competition. So leave a comment down below if you want to see this versus something else that I might keep in my kit, like the Axum Cineview. Actually, that's a pretty good idea. Let's do that.